Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. This video is going to be magnificently short, and I'm going to hold myself to the magnificently short part. Oftentimes, history is told through the lens of people with means, the winners. Who won this conflict, and what do they want to tell you about the fact that they won it, and how awesome it was that they won, and how the world is full of chocolate and ice cream that they were able to bash and kill and murder a bunch of people they didn't like. But there's another story to tell. That story, yes, may be told through the eyes of the victor. And yeah, there may be certain machinations and everything else associated with a victor. But what was it like for the person who was at the receiving end of those bombs? Who was on the ground? Not necessarily the person they were trying to kill, but the other people who was under those bombs. What is the perspective of those people on the receiving end of the victors? That's what I'm getting at. Let's go recent. The United States makes the decision that they want to kill Gaddafi. They decide it is of humanitarian great interest that we go in and stop Gaddafi from killing his own people by killing a lot of his own people. Because again, a bomb dropped by us is a job that's created in America, and we like our jobs, especially in the military industry. Not to mention, there's oil in them there parts, and Gaddafi has dropped the dollar and was talking about starting some kind of Pan-African currency, and we can't have that. We don't like that. So Gaddafi has to go. We're going to bring freedom to Libya. Freedom to Libya. This is one of the gentlemen who was at the receiving end of those bombs. One of the people who were, depending on your disposition, either good or not so good to remain alive under the bombardment, under the slave trade in Libya, under the roving gangs that came afterwards. This is a picture that he put up. This is what it looked like in 2000. Him standing in that plot space. And this is what it looked like in 2018 after the intervention of Western powers that's there to create democracy or something. 2000, 2018. 2000, 2018. 2000, 2018. That was the last one. This has been 18 years. And what those pictures get across is chaos. Bombs, killing, roving gangs, selling Africans, chaos. That is what is taking place as a result of our intervention in that part of the world. And let's not be coy. The chaos that was created in the first place that got the Western powers to come up with some kind of justification for bombing and whatnot. We instigated that in similar ways that we were instigating that chaos that's taking place in Syria with this idea of supporting terrorists and everything else, pretending as if this was all a civil uprising, pretending as if this was all just regular people raising their pitchforks to the sky and being mowed down by governmental forces. It's a farce. I understand there may be some people out there who are pushing back on it, and I support whatever the Libyan people want to do in the same way I support full on what the Syrian people want to do, but not Western intervention. We've shaped that area of the globe, meaning the West. We've literally carved out many of those countries, the Brits, especially after World War I. Carved out many of those countries. We're done. We've done enough. We've been fucking around in that part of the globe long enough. We've been propping up dictators long enough. And the idea that we're going to go and smash those countries to bits and kill all of those people and we're going to use some kind of pretext of humanitarian causes is utter nonsense. This idea of humanitarianism in Syria, where we were paying gangs and paying rapists and killers. How humanitarian. How humanitarian. our efforts in these parts of the world has not come for good ends. That's my point. And it's not even good intent that was baked into the things, that the reason that people were doing these things, talking about us in this part of the globe. Whether you want to say it's for oil, whether you want to say it's for geopolitical influence, all of that somewhat pales to this idea of what is the outcome for the people who are living in those regions. And that's not a positive outcome. Libya was a mistake. And I don't mean mistake in the sense that they didn't know what they were doing. I'm talking about mistake in the sense that it should have never been done in the first place. Not a strategic mistake from the standpoint of, oh, our military should do this or that. We shouldn't have been involved in the first place. And we've caused disaster in that region of the globe. Selling fucking Africans. Think about that. The black president, the first black president, presides over or assists in a military conquest that ends up with them selling slaves. How ironic. How ironic. I'm going to end this here. I'm not going to keep this one long. Jamal, did you ever watch The Revolution when that be televised about the aborted coup of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez? I haven't watched that revolution when that be televised. I do know a little bit about the coup that took Chavez out, and the fact that we were backing the party that essentially pulled the coup off. We're involved in this shit, man. I mean, we're paying money all across the world to dictators and propping these guys up. Gaddafi, at what point, was somebody we propped up. Gaddafi was somebody we propped up at one point, but now we hate his guts. Now we don't like him. Freedom and democracy, my ass. We've been killing a lot of people around the globe, and we've been working to bad ends. And the media in America pretends as if everything that we do has good intent baked into it. Nonsense. Nonsense. You can't be that much of a buffoon. You can't be that much of a fuck up. You can't be that wrong that often. You can't be. You can't be. There's no way. And what I'm saying is, this argument that we always work with good intent and bad things just gonna happen is utter folly and nonsense. It's make-believe. If a person does something, I look at what the person does in this case. Well, we've been doing bad things. The original intent, by the way, of what took place in Libya wasn't supposed to be for regime change. At all. Regime change didn't supposed to have anything to do with it. Remember that when they're trying to get support in order to do the same thing in Syria. Remember that. Remember that. Remember what they did in Libya when you're looking at what's taking place in Syria. The media in the United States often has this amazing ability, this gross amnesia of the failings that have taken place as they move on to create another failing. And the media, the Chuck Todds of the world, are oblivious. Utterly oblivious. You're wrong. Libya was destruction on purpose. Oh, I know. What are you talking about? I'm saying it was intent. It depends on what you mean by destruction on purpose. They did go in to change regimes. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know what you're saying. ConocoPhillips confiscated $2 billion of Venezuela oil. Oil prices are going up, and they have to stop Venezuela from profiting on socialism or succeed. Yeah. Agree. That I agree with you on. Golden salads. I don't know what you mean when I'm saying Libya was not on purpose. I am saying that they make this argument as if when they go into places, they are doing it for the benefit of the people who are there going to those places. I'm saying that is nonsense. I'm saying that's nonsense. Speaking of media, the New York Times had an article about the Palestinian demonstrations from the Israeli soldiers' perspective. They always do that. They always do that. They always do that. That's called just the New York Times. That's just called the New York Times. Do you know after there were some weapons or something that were fired, and I look at the newspapers, and one article after the next, it's just the Israeli side. That's all you hear. This is what took place from the Israeli perspective. That's the only story that we need to provide. It's like, what? What? It's like, are you fucking kidding me? Gaddafi wanted a united Africa, yes, but most African leaders are errand boys for Washington and Paris. So it's two things. It's more than that. Gaddafi was talking about a pan-African currency, yes. Gaddafi also had a ton of gold. Gaddafi had a magnificent amount of gold. They wanted the oil contracts immediately after taking Libya. French and Brits go in to try to essentially parse up the oil. That's one part. I've done that story before. And the other part had to do with stopping any level of talks on a Pan-African currency. That's what it boils down to. The humanitarian stuff is a fig leaf. It's a pretext. It's like voter ID laws. It's like, oh man, we have all this voter fraud. What comes first, however, is we need to do X. What is X? X is whatever it is. In order to do X, we can't tell people that we want to do X because people will be aghast if we tell them that. So we need to come up with another plan of Y, which will demand us to do X to get away with it. So we need to lower the number of people who vote. Great. We can't come out and tell people that we want to lower the number of people who vote because people would be aghast by that and that would offend their sensibilities. What we can do, however, is tell them that there is rampant voter fraud. And because there is rampant voter fraud, we need to essentially put certain things in place to lessen the number of people to vote. Now, the argument at this point becomes whether or not there's voter fraud. But it doesn't matter if there's an argument for it. We've already enacted the plan. You're debating on something that we've already gone through enacting, which allows us to do what we want to do in the first place. Same thing here. We don't want Gaddafi to push through this idea of a Pan-African currency, and we want access to that oil. We need both. Now, we need to get rid of Gaddafi. We can't just say we want to attack Gaddafi because people will frown upon that. But if we come up with a humanitarian issue, hey, and we have tons of cash that we can pay to stir up trouble in that part of the world, we can use that as a justification for reason to use our powers to attack Gaddafi. Well, that's great. The rest of the world, at the very least from the West, thinks the guy's a horrible person. Once you think somebody's a horrible person, you don't necessarily look further into it. And people who are saying, wait a minute, you're going to end up killing a lot of people, those are naysayers. And that we're going to have targeted strikes because our bombs and missiles zone right in on the very specific people who we're trying to hit. And there's no collateral damage for other people who are there, who just happens to be nearby. Of course, this is lunacy and comical, but that's the logic that they go by. And they would put that narrative out. They would constrain the information because the people who report it are just stenographers. And they will report what they're told to report. Gaddafi is going to kill civilians. Gaddafi is going to hurt the civilian population. The United States is doing what's good. They're doing what's right. They have unicorns and they drop Nerf bombs that only hit the bad people. Same thing with the UK. Same thing with France. And they go about their bombing campaigns. And the rest of the world, at least from the standpoint of the West, pays no mind to what they're doing. And they're killing one person after the next, after the next, after the next. Gaddafi gets sodomized with a machete. Hillary Clinton giggles. Yes! He got sodomized with a machete. Yes! I love it. I love it. I'm Hillary Clinton. I love it. Absolutely love it. And the world goes about their way. Nothing to see here, folks. You find that they're selling slaves. You find that Obama is saddened by the events that have taken place, by the calamity that has befallen Libya. They're saddened by those things. And yet those things have taken place nonetheless. And yes, there are no consequences for those things as they take place, for the calamity and the disaster that they befall on a bunch of innocent civilians. Humanitarian is the pretext that they use in order to do that. Gaddafi being a bad guy helps people not look further into the fact that they're going to end up murdering a lot of other innocent people. Same thing with Syria. Same thing with any other despot that they've decided to take down. So I'm going to end this here. Just a heads up on what's taking place. I have a few stories that I can do in this code. The gold dinar was a threat to the global elite Red Bull road mule. Yes, agreed. Agreed. What do you think about Rwanda and Paul Kagame? Where do things look like they could be going? Honestly, I don't know. I've been following a little bit of news in Africa, but I had to be honest, Rwanda is a little bit in the boonies for me. But I will look it up. Kagame. Jamal, do you know this, but African nations that were colonized by France to this day have to pay taxes to France. I did not know that. Any agreement they want to get, they got to have France's blessing. Unbelievable. Are you serious? I did not know that. Go to silence. Wow. I did not know that. You know, it's wild. Macron comes out and is like, they're Africans. They're Africans. Angry that somebody is making a point to him that you did this. You, Macron, were responsible in large part to the fact that they were selling Africans. Macron seems to believe that because Africans are selling Africans, that France has no bearing and responsibility for it. Nonsense! Those were your planes. Those were the United States and Britain's planes. What is taking place right now, what they're doing, you are directly responsible. Talking about their Africans. You can go fuck yourself. Africans, my ass. I just realized my email is fucked up, but I sent you an email, Jamal. Hope you got it. I haven't checked my email. I'll check it, Bernie. Winkle. I want to have you on for more Tom stuff, because that shit was hilarious. That shit was hilarious. Alright, guys. Yeah, those slaves, like, ignore the slaves. Alright, guys. I'm going to end this here. Thank you guys for showing up. It's a Saturday evening, so I'm going to call this a day. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. Thanks, everyone. And we